Hi, I'm George LaFleche, and welcome to Rinkside Regression, episode number one. With me is my co-host for this show, and
What's up?
yeah,
What's up,
Jack.
everybody? I'm Jack.
And yeah, this will be fun. If any of you watched the off-season deep dives that I did uh, this summer, a lot of them, well, not a lot of them, but a couple of them were with Jack. He was a recurring guest on that, and we had talked quite a bit about starting some kind of podcast, and it's something that I've done before in the past. And I know there's going to be a bunch of people who uh, have been down that road with me. I guess this could be for the third time, but hopefully, we can do something that's sustainable and it should be exciting. I'm very excited to get this started. It's something that I've always wanted to do, and just based on time and availability, it just kind of died off in the past. And I think we've set up a pretty solid outline and a plan for how we want these episodes to go. And I think that was something that I was missing in my previous adventures in the podcasting world. So I'm looking forward to it. But I don't know if you have any opening thoughts before we get going.
Yeah, definitely. It's pretty cool that we've been talking about this for a few months now, and now words are coming into action here. So,
Yeah, and we picked a pretty good time to start because
yeah,
there was some pretty big news over the weekend. Um, and I guess that's where we can start. And it was the Miko Rantanen trade to the Carolina Hurricanes. And if I was a professional podcaster, I would have pulled up the full trade to be able to read it. But I'm gonna try to do it off the dome. Uh, so it was Miko Rantanen and Taylor Hall to the Carolina Hurricanes. Chicago got a third round pick, I believe,
yeah.
in it to eat half of Ranton's salary. And so they basically didn't like lose any cap at all, because I think half of Ranton's salary was pretty close to what Taylor Hall's full salary was. They just got a third round pick to move a player basically for free.
Actually, less.
Was it less? Okay, well then
Yeah.
fine. They saved money. They got a third round pick to save money. Um, and then the Avalanche got Jack Drury, Martin Necas, a second and a fourth.
Yeah.
There we go. And there's somebody else. There's the rights to some like Div 3 player that also went to the Hurricanes, but I don't think that's really relevant to the discussion. But anyway, jumping into this first, like, what do you think the implications are for this trade? Like, on the first of all, on the Hurricanes. Let's start with Carolina, because they're the most interesting team in this situation, I think.
Yeah, definitely. If you look at Carolina over their window as they've sort of opened up around like 2018, 2019, I believe, that sort of like the Rod Brindamore era when they started being competitive out of the rebuild. They've never had this true top end, like top 15 player in the league that
Yeah.
most Stanley Cup winners in recent memory have had. So going out and getting a guy like Ranson, not in the offseason, but mid-season, is extremely impressive and should do wonders for their group. Last year they went out and they tried Jake Gensel at the deadline. They weren't able to get a extension done with him for the future, so they lost him to Tampa Bay. But maybe Ranson in this case they can extend long term and he could be the superstar here for like the next 7, 8 years.
And I think that that's the biggest thing, is just obviously getting the extension done is a key part of this. But even if they don't, like, the amount that they paid for even what could be a rental, I think was pretty, like, it was a pretty good trade. Like, I think if Carolina walks out of this, even without a cup, because obviously you can't guarantee a cup, but you can get yourself close, right? Like, let's say they make a conference final this year, um, and Rantanen does leave, like, they really didn't lose anything. Like, they lose Nichas, who, let's be honest, especially now this move is made, they weren't going to come to a long term agreement with anyway, most likely. And that's about it. Like, you lose a late second and a fourth round pick, and you lose Jack Jury, who's fine. But like, they didn't move any of their top prospects. They didn't move a first round pick. I don't see how, even if he leaves, that this was a bad trade for the Hurricanes. And I think that's a testament to Eric Tolsky's like really first major move as the GM of the Hurricanes.
Yeah, I definitely think that Tulsa did a nice job with this trade, holding on to some of the key assets for the future. Nate just wasn't in the long-term plan, and he was almost gone this summer, regardless
Yeah.
of the Rantanen trade. There was buzz around him in places like Vancouver anyway. That would have been really interesting to see if Nate just got traded for like Elias Patterson or JT Miller over the summer. That could have been cool destination for both those guys. But back to Rantanen, I just can't believe like I remember it was just like random Friday, just sitting on my phone, and then all of a sudden report Mikko Rantanen's going to Carolina, and it was just out of nowhere. Like there were
Yeah.
no rumors, nothing. It came out today actually that Rantanen was willing to take that pay cut. I think he was the last offer that the Avalanche made was around like the 11.75, so just shy of 12 million camp. I
Yeah.
think Rantanen was looking around 12.6, I believe.
Yeah.
So they were off by like a million with the
And like,
salary.
yeah, I think that sounds about what it was. And of course you got like Hale McCarr coming up fairly soon, and it is a lot. It is a ton of salary to pay to three guys. And I mean you're gonna have to pay McCarr a ton. Like it'll be a couple million, probably more than that Rantanen deal or what it was. Because it sounds like Colorado's willing to kind of just give him a blank check, and I mean, fair
Yeah,
enough. Uh,
they already said that. They
yeah,
literally already came out and said like, hey, like this McKinnon Bar negotiation does not apply for the Makar extension that
yeah,
it did for the Rantanen one. So
yeah, and I think that's reasonable because Makar is significantly younger and is higher up in his position, uh, like rank. If that like he's top one or two, whereas Rantanen's like a top 10 forward, top
for
ish
sure, yeah,
in that. So obviously you're talking about a pretty significant player either way, but I understand the difference in the negotiation. And I mean they can't lose Makar, like they have to figure that out. So it's definitely an interesting deal from Colorado's side of it. Um, uh, Martin Necas is an interesting player. Obviously, he's I think 2 years younger than Ranton is. Um, so they get a bit of a boost there, and he's got the security of one more season under contract, which I think is a big deal for a team that's kind of going through a bit of a transition period. Kind of having that extra year of security lets them kick this negotiation down the road a little bit, or potentially move him in the summer if that's the direction they want to go to. So, uh, how much worse do you think that this trade made Colorado in terms of this season?
this season I definitely think it hurt, but it's nice to see them balance the lineup, having
Yeah,
a guy like Jack Drury with all the trades and injuries that they've had to go through. Obviously, with the cup tax, they've gotten rid of a lot of guys over the past few years, so their bottom six have gotten really shallow. And
yeah,
then the whole thing with Nichushkin coming in and out of the player assistance program. So it was nice to add a center like Drury for the bottom six because
mhm,
I believe they have like Parker Kelly as their third line center right now, not ideal for
yeah,
cup contending. And then for the top six, I mean, Natchez, I think, is a player that's going to work in this Colorado system. He's going to be able to play to his strengths a little more, using his speed off zone entries and stuff like that, playing on a line with McKinnon. That's already one of the fastest lines in the
yeah,
NHL. And I think with Colorado too, I think players in Bednar's system do a really good job as being complementary pieces, like just standing behind McKinnon and Makar and saying, all right, you two are going to run the show. Like, we're going to support you and play behind you. Like, Colorado doesn't need any more star power, so it
yeah,
sucks losing Rantanen. He's a very valuable player. But even if you look at guys they had like Nazem Kadri, Arturi Lehkonen, those guys have come in and have sat back in that secondary role and have been fantastic. And they said, all right, McKinnon, you drive the ship. I'll support you right there. So I think Nate just will fit in just fine. Probably could be like a 70, 75 point player. And
yeah.
he'll get more opportunity too.
Well, yeah, he'll especially now that Randon's not kind of clogging up that spot. Clogging might not be the right word because he's awesome, but it'll give him kind of that second. I mean, he's like their second best forward, right? In Colorado now, compared to being what like third or fourth in Carolina, depending on where you rank Sveshnikov, I guess.
I'd take him
Um,
over Svechnikov right now.
yeah, so third, right? Because you probably have Jarvis and Aho ahead of him. So even then, right? It's a lot more clear that he's the second guy in Colorado now. So hopefully with that role, he'll be able to continue to kind of take a stand and develop. I guess there's a lot of talk about this deal in terms of it being like the biggest trade in recent memory. Uh, for me, like just the moment of it, the fact that this happened mid-season, um, between two teams that are like contending, like two top-ish 10 teams in the league. puts it ahead of like the Matthew Kachuk trade for me, even if like you want to say the players involved in the Kachuk trade were slightly better. I think the moment of this deal and the fact that a deal like this happened during the season, which we like never see, um, kind of elevates it over that for me. The only trade I can really compare it to is like the Joe Thornton trade, and Boston I think was like below 500 when that happened. So it really wasn't in the same kind of vein as a Stanley Cup contender, kind of saying we're going to take a step back this year to look to the future. But for me, I think this is arguably the biggest trade of my lifetime, and it was fun. I had a good
Sure,
time.
yeah. I got no disagreements there. I think the other part about it that was cool, similar to the Kachuk trade, was just the surprise
Yeah,
aspect of it. Like there was no build up for this trade. This wasn't an expected move. This wasn't reported in the media for weeks, months. This
yeah,
just came out of right field. So,
yeah.
and I think the NHL needs more of this, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Like this is how you get interest in the sport, right? A big like this is like I was out for dinner on Friday, and this is all we talked about for like an hour. Mostly because it took about an hour for all the trade details to come through, but that's NHL front office stuff doing their typical uh you know water drip uh reporting.
Yeah.
But that's something that they're going to have to definitely figure out because that's not doesn't seem to be a problem in the NBA or the NFL. So hopefully that they can kind of figure out a better way to get this news out. But a big trade like this, really a two-way trade, um, with Chicago just kind of being a middleman for eating a bit of salary. It, you want to get this stuff out quickly, and that's the one kind of negative I'd say is that the weight on the news for this was a little underwhelming.
It was a little dreadful. It was a
Yeah,
little
it
dreadful.
would kind of it dragged on a little bit, but that's something that hopefully we can get fixed in the future. Um, so now we're gonna move on to a weekly segment that I'm gonna run. And Jackson have his own weekly segment soon, but we're just getting started. We're just gonna try stuff out. So this is something that I'm inspired by Nick Wright from First Things First. I want to give him the credit for it because it's a cool segment that he does in the NFL every week, where he ranks all the teams in tiers. Instead of doing like your typical power rankings, it's tier rankings. So the teams in each tier are not in order, but they just kind of get their own tier. So I'm going to rifle through them, and then we're going to kind of discuss. And this is something that's going to happen every week. I also want to mention that for the future, I will be eliminating teams from like the league basically as the season goes on. And for the first week, I'm allowed to eliminate teams, but every week after this, they must be in the brink of elimination tier before I can eliminate them, if that makes sense. So they kind of get a week of being on the verge of elimination before I can just kick them out of my tier rankings. But this week is different because we're halfway through the season. This is our first episode, so I can do what I want. Uh, So here we go. NHL tiers. Bottom of the tier, eliminated from the playoffs, eliminated from the season. We won't talk about them ever again this year on these rankings. The Chicago Blackhawks and the San Jose Sharks, both teams below 450-ish games into the season. Neither of these teams really have a hope of making the playoffs, even if they went on like a 800 win percentage run. The season's probably over anyway. Brink,
Yikes.
yeah, brink of elimination tier. Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Anaheim, Nashville, and Seattle. All these teams are below 500, and both of them have significant climbs to make if they were to push for a playoff spot. A Herculean Andrew Hammond-esque effort might get them close, but at this point, these teams should be looking towards next season, and they're very close to being eliminated. The should be considering selling tier. Philadelphia Flyers, New York Islanders, Detroit Red Wings, and St. Louis Blues. The Flyers, Islanders, and Red Wings are 12th, 13th, and 14th in win percentage in the NHL in the Eastern Conference. St. Louis is only 10th, but their gap between them and Vancouver is a decent enough gap. And I just don't think they have the horses to really contend if they did make the playoffs. It'd be a pretty easy out in the first round. So if you got some UFAs to sell, get rid of them. Other than that, uh, that's about it. Look towards next year. No man's land. Vancouver and the New York Rangers, both these teams have had turbulent seasons. They've been very up and down. They're both very much regressed from where they were last season. There's been a lot of noise about players potentially getting moved, not getting moved. Obviously, you have JT Miller and Elias Pettersson killing each other in the locker room, apparently, but then also being best friends. You have the New York Rangers players calling for big moves to happen and then nothing happening. Both these teams just kind of need to figure it out. They have to kind of figure out what direction they want to go with their rosters, what the plan is moving forward.
Ironically, these two teams might trade.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
That's the irony in it all.
Next here, worry about a name. Utah Hockey Club. You've been littered with injuries. I mean, Dylan Gunther's been hurt. Sean Durzi's been hurt. Sergachev's been hurt. Connor Ingram missed a bunch of time. But when these guys are playing, they look good. Logan Cooley looks like a true number one line center. He's developing well. This isn't going to be your year. You're not making the playoffs this season because of the injuries, but just figure out your team name. Like, get that sorted out. Worry about the hockey next year. Move on. It's been fun. Montreal, Columbus, and Calgary. All three of these teams significantly better than where people thought they were going to be at the start of the season. All three of these teams getting carried by young, up and coming players. You have Marchenko in Columbus. You have Dustin Wolf looking like a true number one in Calgary. Lane Hudson, probably the front runner for the Calder at this point. Don't overdo it. Don't try to buy. Don't try to accelerate the rebuild. Just stay the course. It's been a fun year. Um, Next year, it's got to be you got to make it in now. The Ottawa Senators. There's no excuses. The Eastern wildcard race is a mess. There's a bunch of super flawed teams. You guys went out. You went all in the last couple of years. You traded for a Chikrin. It didn't work. You've went out. You signed Giroux. You went and got Allmark. There's no more excuses anymore. Make the playoffs. This is the best opportunity you've had. It's the best roster you've had. It's the easiest path to a playoff spot you've had. Just make the playoffs. The pretenders tier: Boston, Minnesota, LA, and Colorado. All four of these teams likely make the playoffs. All four of them, I think, are pretty comfortable. I'm pretty comfortable saying are first round exits. They all have pretty major flaws at this point, and they're going to have tough matchups in round one. But you're going to make the playoffs, most likely. So congratulations. Can they win a round? Dallas, Tampa Bay, Toronto. Dallas is most likely playing Minnesota. Tampa Bay, Toronto are most likely playing each other. All three of these teams went into the year probably thinking that they were Stanley Cup contenders, all three of which have had decent seasons. But the question is, can they win more than one round? And at this point, can they win a round? Still kind of up in the air for me. Second highest tier on the list, the regular season darlings: Florida, Winnipeg, Washington, New Jersey, and Vegas. All five of these teams have either exceeded expectations or been better than they were last year. All five of them have pretty significant flaws in their roster. They've all had really good regular seasons. They've all been really fun. Can they get it done in the playoffs? They all have different question marks around their teams. Now it's time to prove it. Finally, at the top of the tiers, the 2006 Stanley Cup final: Carolina Hurricanes, Edmonton Oilers. They're both number
Wow.
two in their conferences, based on points percentage. I think they're probably the most two complete rosters in their conferences. This would be a really fun Cup final. Those are the NHL tiers. Ooh, that was a lot. um, there you go. So that's gonna be something that we do every week. Jack's also gonna have a tier ranking thing coming up. But yeah, there you go. Any quick thoughts on the tiers that you want to fight me on for
The
week
best
one?
part about the tiers, in my opinion, this week was the Rangers and Canucks being in the same tier because those teams might conduct a massive trade and remain in mediocrity together.
And
So
maybe it doesn't even help. It's gonna be the same position. It's gonna be great. I
just
love
moving
it.
assets for fun.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Why not? Uh, I think the Canucks should just trade JT Miller and Elias Pettersson together just to
I
see what
agree.
happens.
And then Quinn Hughes to the Devils.
Yes. Oh my God, please. Um, for like just a bag of pucks, and that's it.
Yeah, it's gonna be the trade's gonna be Quinn Hughes is gonna go to New Jersey for Simone Nemec and Dawson Mercer.
Yep. There you go.
And that's it.
Perfect. That sounds about right. All right, so now we're going to jump into some of the other news that happened over the past week. And I guess the biggest piece of news was I'll start with this first. We'll go in order. Was the Will Borgen contract, 4.1 mil
Ooh,
for 5 years. What's the ooh for? What did I do?
no, just
Oh, okay.
not the best extension.
Okay. I thought something happened. It's like, was like, was that the Sidney Crosby to Colorado trade that we're about to break? Um, yeah, Oregon, I'm not a huge fan. He had a good year in Seattle last year. Has had a pretty bad year in New York this year. I'm curious as to what, as somebody who's on my New York Rangers video, I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on this contract.
Morgan looked really good in Seattle for a few years. He was originally with the Sabres and then ended up
Yes,
with the Kraken early in their
was he their
franchise.
expansion draft pick?
I
I think he was.
I think he was. Yes,
I think
I
he,
want
okay.
to say he was.
Let's say he was.
And
Sorry.
he was paired with Alexiak for a couple years, and the two of them played a good shutdown role, especially the year Seattle made the playoffs when they
Yeah,
lost in Game 7 to Dallas. I think it was 2 years ago now, 2023.
yeah,
He looked good. He played against some of the most difficult matchups in the league, and he was a sought after asset. I remember last year at the trade deadline, and nothing came about because Seattle was looking to sell pieces because they underachieved last year. This year they continued to underachieve, even after signing Montour and Chandler Stevenson. It's
yeah.
looking like a disaster. However, they recouped Kako in the process of getting rid of Borgen, which looks really good for them.
Yes.
And this Borgen deal, if the stars align, it'll be an okay contract in my opinion. But right now, there was no reason to give this guy the term they did and the salary. I think Borgen's worth more in the 2 to 2.5 million range at this point in time. He's looked decent with the Rangers. He's formed a nice pairing with Keandre Miller, but for right now, I don't understand why teams continue to pay big bucks for one-dimensional defenders, which I think is a
Yeah.
pretty common trend we've seen as well, where
Oh, for sure.
these these defensive defensemen get these large contracts for to only provide on one side of the puck.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I think the big thing is just it's not even providing on one side of the puck. I think it's just if you have a pure like offensive guy, I think the discussion might be a little bit different. But it's especially the defensive guys that are getting paid. I mean, if you look at this summer, like there was just insane, even the last like 2 years ago, there's just insane contracts handed out to like sturdy defensive defensemen who like the Joel Edmondsons of the world getting like long-term deals. It's just I don't understand why teams consistently pay for low event players. And I honestly think part of it is just coach laziness. And the reason why I say that is because you can throw out a shutdown low event defensive defenseman and just not think about it, right? Like you can just kind of just tap him on the shoulder and go out and nothing bad's going to happen. Whereas if you have a like a pure offensive guy, like the only name that's coming to mind is Victor Mete. But like let's talk Montreal Canadiens, Victor Mete. Um, you kind of have to scheme around them. You have to make sure you have players out there that can make up for the defensive deficiencies. And that takes a lot more work, especially when you're talking about a player who's going to play 12, 14 minutes a night. Right. It's easier to do that for a guy like that who's going to play, 24, 25. But for these bottom of the lineup guys, and the same thing for forwards too. Um, I just think coaches don't want to have to spend the time to scheme around a player who might get you, 25, 30 points. But so that's why I think these players kind of are at a premium just because it makes it a lot easier to build a lineup around them. But the teams that are going to go out and actually find schemes for those, super cheap offensive guys are the teams that generally do a lot better when it comes to winning hockey games. So I think there's a correlation there as well.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And also another deal that was signed in the Metro was the Logan Thompson contract,
Oh
the
God, yeah.
5.85 by 6 years. Washington just signed that today, which is the 27th of January. He's had a great season. He's second in goals saved above expected. He's not going to be representing Team Canada at the Four Nations face-off,
Drew Doughty might be
but
though.
yeah, he's making a comeback from injury, which is pretty exciting. You can also consider Mackenzie Weegar too for that team.
Yeah, I think the choice that Team Canada is going to make, and I'm going to put that this is a joke, but I also want to just put it out in the ecosystem because when it happens, I'll look like a genius. It's going to be Mike Matheson. That's going to be the defenseman. I'm locking in. I don't have no faith in Team Canada. They're going to pick Mike Matheson because he's having a good year playing with Lane Hudson. That's going to be that's the guy. That's going to be their seventh defenseman.
That being very
I,
interesting if that
yeah,
ended up being the
I think it should.
selection.
I think it should be Evan Bouchard. That's personally that's who I would pick.
Yeah, you
But
could go with Weegar, you could go with Bouchard. I think they went for enough defensive stability, selecting guys like Colton Parenko and Travis Sanheim. So I think Bouchard would be the right pick
Which
to
like
bring.
sorry, continue.
No, I was just gonna say to bring some more offense to the table from the back end, but
See my and like I could rip on the Thompson contract. I think everybody knows my thoughts on this. Like, don't pay goalies. Don't pay goalies for having crazy hot seasons. Logan Thompson is a I like Logan Thompson. I think he's a wonderful 1A, 1B kind of guy, but you're paying him starter money to be a full-time starter. I don't know if that's something that he can do consistently for 6 years. He's doing it this year, but is it sustainable? Probably not. Like you have the formula in front of you, Washington. You just brought him in here to be like this split tandem with Charlie Lindgren, who had a really strong season last year. He's kind of had injuries and fell off a little bit this year, but that's what happens when you pay like these like B level goalies. So it frustrates me, and it's unfortunate because I really like Logan Thompson, but I don't like him at this price point. And it might work out, but it's a gamble that I wouldn't take, right? Like you might win the lottery if you buy a 649 ticket. You shouldn't spend your life savings on it. Like, I don't know. It irritates me. But I do kind of because you brought up the Four Nations. Um we could do a whole episode on the Four Nations, and I think we should right before the tournament. Um
definitely.
but Team Canada's roster building really annoyed me. And they built their team to win 2-1 hockey games. They don't have the goaltending to win 2-1 hockey games. I think Team Canada should have went all offense, try to win every game 6-5, and just say screw it. Pick the best 20 best offensive players you have, throw them on a line, and just score 8 goals a game and try to win that way. Because that's what the goaltending is, right? Like they do not have the consistent goaltending, especially if you look at the rest of the tournament outside of Finland. The goaltending is just insane. Or I guess Sweden, sorry. The goaltending is just way better than Canada. So just lean into it. Score 10 goals a game. That should have been the plan, but it wasn't. And I think it bites in the butt uh, in the world, whatever it is, Four Nations. But that's a whole nother tangent. Do you have anything to talk about with Logan Thompson?
Yeah, this seems sort of like a Tristan Jarry-esque contract. When I saw this announced today, Thompson is good, but again, we talk about sustainability, long-term regression to the mean. It's been half a season in Washington. Things can quickly turn for the worse. And I definitely agree with you on the 1A, 1B philosophy that they were going for. Charlie Lindgren looked fantastic last season. This season, not so much, riddled with injuries, struggling a little bit. That's fine. Logan Thompson picks up the slack. And
Yeah.
who knows, back half of the season, maybe Logan Thompson hits a wall and starts to struggle, and Charlie Lindgren steps up. That's the purpose of the 1A, 1B
Yes.
rotation. So I don't think it was smart to tie up this much money, but Washington looks good right now. The question is just, will they be able to sustain this play heading into the playoffs? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
I'm not
We
worried
spoke
about Spencer
earlier.
Carberry though.
No, no, I think he's good. I liked him last year too, and I'm I'm kind of sold on the on him as a head coach at this point. The Scott Perunovich trade also happened. I think that was today as
It
well.
was today.
Um,
A lot happened today.
yeah, fifth round pick, I believe it was to the Islanders
Yeah.
or to St. Louis.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, this is kind of what I mean. Like, this is one of the players that like I think this trade kind of works out for both teams. I like Perunovich, but again, he's a bottom pair offensive kind of defenseman. These are the kind of guys I'm talking about, like where a lot of teams wouldn't look at a Perunovich, and if the roles were reversed and Perunovich was a crazy shutdown defensive defenseman, he probably goes for a second or a third. Um, but it, I like the move. I'm a fan of him for the Islanders. I don't know. Well, I don't know why the Islanders are buying, but I guess this is a really low risk buy, so it's not crazy. But uh, I also don't really understand what the plan is now with Tony D'Angelo. Uh, it kind of seems like irrelevant now, but uh, it's on in a vacuum, I guess it's fine. Like I think the Islanders did good, but I don't really know what the plan is with that blue line now. But I like Perunovich.
They might arguably have the deepest blue line in terms of quality NHL defensemen. They
Yeah,
have 8 when healthy. They have
Yeah.
Dobson, they have Pelic, they have Romanov, they have Pollock, they have D'Angelo and Perunovic now, and then they also have Mike Riley and Scott Mayfield.
Yeah.
So that's 8.
Yeah. So
And
like I
they also have a great goalie tandem. They have Sorokin, who isn't the same goalie he was 2 years ago, but is still a quality
yeah,
starter.
he's
And
yeah.
they even have one of the best backups in Varlamov, which is crazy.
Yeah. So like
And
I don't know.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
fine.
the Islanders, maybe if things can turn around for them, I doubt they will. They should be selling, like you said in your team tiers at the start of the episode, but you never know. What are your thoughts on Patrick Waugh as a coach? I'm curious your thoughts on
I actually
him.
don't know. I don't think it's weird. I'm not sure what to think of the Islanders as a whole because I don't think the roster is very good. Um, but he hasn't really done anything yet that's like shown me that he's like elevated this team. Like I haven't seen the Matt Barzell breakout that I was promised. I haven't really seen I mean, Noah Dobson's been good, but he was good for a couple of years. I don't know. Like he's fine, I guess. Like there hasn't been this like, oh my God, they got a guy who's not a pure defensive coach in there now. Let's see what happens, right? Like I really hope Matt Barzell gets moved just for my own like sick enjoyment. Um, I think you throw a Matt Barzell on a team like the Canadians, and that'd be a lot of fun. Uh, that's kind of my fantasy booking for a Matt Barzell. It's not going to happen because I don't think Montreal's going to move assets to get him. But like, could you imagine next year a line of Barzell, Demidov, and Line? Like, oh my God, like that
Yeah,
would
that'd
be
be
fun.
crazy.
But like that's my fantasy booking for a Barzell trade. But like, just get him out of New York. Like, it's not working. He's not this like elite first line center like point producer that he was his first year as a rookie with John Tavares. I I don't know, but
And
I don't know. Like, was fine.
he's been moved to the wing too now. Bo
Yeah,
Horvat centering that line. And speaking of their center depth, they're looking to move on from Brock Nelson too, who's been there forever.
yeah, as they should because he's a free agent and they should sell
Yeah.
him. But
Hope they should get a good haul from him. He's back to back 30 goal scorer. If maybe not back to back, but 2 of the last 3 years he scored 30 plus. So he should get a first round pick.
how much does
Is he?
Barzell have left on his term?
I don't know, but his I know his AAV is around 8.5.
Yeah. Because like unless Barzell has like significant term, I wouldn't be surprised if they get more
His
for
underline's
Nelson.
been really good in the 27 games he's played this year.
Not Barzell, he's got a couple years left. Okay, never mind. But like I don't know, I have this feeling that the NHL is going to severely underrate Matt Barzell. He has 3 more years left after this, so he's going to get if he was going to get moved, it would be significant just because of that. But
He even came out with that quote too the other day during the game. Like they caught him on the broadcast saying, "Wow, this UBS arena is empty," which I thought was wild too.
it's funny. I love the hot mics. It's great. Um, so yeah, I don't know if you have anything else to add about the Islanders, but that's most of our news today. I think, unless I'm missing anything. I guess Nikolai Bell was placed on waivers.
Yeah, the guy
Um,
that dented the Stanley Cup.
yep. Again, just good depth player that somebody could pick up for free. But instead, teams are paying fourth liners $3 million a season.
Don't overpay for bottom six forwards,
Yeah,
please.
it's there you go. It's a problem.
Talking to you, New York Rangers.
Yeah,
Talking to you.
well, Casey Zegas got a pretty hefty deal from the Islanders too, so it's something in New York, I guess,
Yeah.
is where people
And
just
speaking
overpay
of New
for
York,
guys.
it's Buffalo that's waiving
Yeah,
Kubel as well. So
there you go. Well, Buffalo's kind of a disaster right now, so that's who knows what they're doing. They might trade
will
for Elias
they
Pettersson.
will they ever make the playoffs again?
I, I'm starting to lose hope. Um, I have a conspiracy theory with Buffalo, but I don't have time to talk about it today. So maybe next episode, that's what we can talk about.
Elias Pettersson to Buffalo for like I think the report was Dylan Cousins and
And
one of
Byram,
Owen Power or Bowen Byram would be
yeah.
ludicrous.
Which I feel like there's a pretty big gap between the value of Owen Power and Bone Byram. Like I don't really consider them to be on the same like I don't know, maybe it's just me doing my first overall bias, but like
Yeah.
I don't know, I'd still value Owen Power more than Bone Byram. Like,
Yeah, for sure.
but I don't know. Anyway, that is it for our first episode. So thank you for everybody who listened. And if you enjoyed, leave a like. Make sure to follow us. We can be found on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. We also have an Instagram account, which isn't will be up by the time this episode goes up. Um, and yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.